recorded. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming by to our page and wanting to listen to this chat. We're super excited to be part of Concave Summit. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about digital wellness and using digital platforms to help educate people on wellness and holistic medicine. So to get us started, my name is Maya. I'm the co-founder of Moom Health. I'll get into a little bit about what Moom does in a second, but before we get there, I'll leave it to both Mili and Lucy to introduce themselves as well.
All right. Hi, I'm Mili. I am also the co-founder of Moom Health. And yeah, Maya will explain a little bit more about what we do.
Hi, and I'm Lucy. I am a naturopathic advisor for Moom, and I'm also a Pilates teacher, and I'm living and working in Sydney, Australia.
Great. Yeah, so Mili and I are based in Singapore, but just to jump straight into it, I'll just give everyone a quick introduction of Moom. We are a women's health company focused on providing natural and holistic solutions for the modern Asian woman. We work with experts in various fields, just like Lucy, to formulate products that target women's most pressing needs. We launched just about 3 months ago here in Singapore, and we're really excited to continue growing. So to start off our conversation, I'm going to take us back to the first experience that I had in the more holistic wellness space. I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 15 years old, was given the birth control pill at quite a young age as well. And after some time, that conventional method of healing didn't really work out for me. So I decided to dip my toes into more holistic versions of wellness and holistic medicine. So I ended up seeing countless types of practitioners, from naturopaths to TCMs to Ayurvedic specialists. Spent a lot of time, spent a lot of money trying to navigate that world. And while I was navigating that world, one of the most common threads I saw in every sort of healing modality that wasn't conventional was that I was asked a lot of questions. So I didn't necessarily think it had anything to do with my PCOS, but they would start asking me questions like, are you stressed out? Do you have low energy? How are you sleeping? Why do you think this is happening? And it kept coming back to that why, which I thought was really interesting. And that ended up leading me down a path of really trying to understand holistic wellness a little bit more, holistic medicine and different healing modalities. But I think something that we're going to talk a little bit about today is that why question, and also that idea that I mentioned earlier about spending so much time and difficulty navigating this holistic world. So to sort of segue into our conversation with Mili and Lucy, I wanted to pose this question to Mili. So can you maybe walk us through a bit on how that experience that I had, that maybe you had as well when we were navigating the more holistic wellness space, became one of the reasons and sort of pushed us to actually start Moom?
Yeah, of course. So in case everybody's not aware, Maya and I are sisters as well. And so her PCOS journey and kind of finding that holistic health solution that worked for her was something that I really think the entire family went through. So I do feel pretty comfortable speaking about that. I think that the main thing that we realized through research, conversations, not only with each other, but also with so many of our friends and family members, was that alternative solutions was often something that people were looking for. It was just where to get started was the toughest thing. And that was kind of a similar place to where Maya was at the beginning of her PCOS journey, where she was given birth control. We were told it was like this magical pill that would solve all her problems. And I guess it did to a certain extent, but it was just not something that she personally felt was going to be the best for her moving forward. And so it took like countless visits to various different kinds of specialists, naturopaths, nutritionists, hormonal specialists. I can't even remember everything that Maya kind of went through. And not only did it take a lot of time, but it was a very costly process to kind of figure out where to get started and what would actually work for her. And so I think that was really one of the big things that pushed us to develop a panel of experts like Lucy to help us not only with our formulation process, but also with developing the quiz, and saying that our quiz is that perfect starting place for you. It asks those why questions that Maya touched upon, and then goes into the more, I guess you could say like technical health related questions that are specific to your wellness goals. So yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates that.
Yeah, and I think, going back to the question of why, I guess, Lucy, something that we can clarify for the audience, like from a naturopathic perspective and this holistic medicine space, why is it so important to ask that why? And why when we go to these sorts of practitioners, do we feel as patients or as customers even that they're asking us so many questions? Like, what is the point of those questions, and how does that differentiate from, say, a conventional medicine practice as well?
Yeah, so I guess when you go and see a regular doctor, generally what they do is ask you the symptoms that you're having, and they usually give you something for the symptoms. So it's usually sort of a band-aid approach to what's going on for you. Whereas as a holistic practitioner, we actually ask all of those different questions, which may seem irrelevant at the time, but it's really to get down to the root cause of what's going on for you. So that's really how we differ as practitioners. I know some of the questions seem really irrelevant, but for us, we're actually trying to get a really big or a really good idea of what's actually going on for you, because all of our systems within the body are interconnected. So it's really good to get an idea of everything so we can actually support you in the best way we can.
Yeah, and I think that's really
That makes sense.
100%. I think what's interesting about what you said is you mentioned like getting to the root cause of an issue. Can you tell us a bit more on, sorry, we might have had a bit of a technological issue there. What I was saying was, based on what you just said, Lucy, something that came up a lot in all of these healing modalities that I saw, and something you just mentioned, was the root cause. Tell us more about what that actually means.
I guess this is best described maybe through an example.
Yeah.
So say with PCOS, so you went to a doctor and you got prescribed the oral contraceptive pill, which is what they get taught in medicine to prescribe for people who have PCOS. But what actually is going on in PCOS, there can be a lot of different things. So obviously we have to investigate that as a practitioner, but it might be excess testosterone, or it might be inflammation, or it might be insulin resistance. So we want to investigate those few things and then treat that. So not just sort of smack you on the OCP or the oral contraceptive pill. And then essentially what would happen if you go off the pill later on in life, or whenever you decide to, all of those symptoms that you've been putting off will come flooding back, essentially. So you're not dealing with the issue that's actually going on. So yeah, instead of sort of treating that insulin resistance or the inflammation or the testosterone, and yes, it can be a little bit of a longer process, and consistency is needed and all of those sort of things, but we actually can get to the bottom of it. So that's sort of why we get to the root cause.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. I do think, as Mili and I were navigating this and we wanted to start Moom, something that came up from that experience and getting to the root cause, it almost feels like your practitioner is on an investigative journey with you. And that can sometimes feel overwhelming. So I think on that front, your initial introduction to the sort of wellness space feels a bit overwhelming to a lot of people. And there seems like there is this gap in terms of education and understanding of what the space really feels like. So for Moom, for example, we really wanted to tackle that by creating this digital platform. Mili, maybe you can expand a bit more on how Moom uses that digital platform and why we decided to go digital with it as well, to educate people more on wellness and holistic medicine in general.
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned with Moom, when you start your journey, it is very much, you take a quiz, you get recommended a certain set of supplements based on your goals and issues that you've kind of stated, and then it gets packed into daily sachets and delivered to your doorstep. But something that Maya and I really did want to prioritize as well was making sure that you could really take control of your own wellness journey and know not only what you were taking, but let's say if you wanted to add something, or you realized actually this is not addressing what I truly want to address, or whatever it may be. So we've been using our predominantly, I would say, Instagram, but also we've just launched a blog. And through those social media platforms to really put out as much educational information as possible and make that information as accessible as possible. And so obviously the digital helps with the accessibility. In everybody's on their phone all the time. It's very easy to look at. But we decided to use Instagram as a very big tool for that, because it really allows you to give that bite-sized, easy to digest information. And while it might not cover every single topic that you would ideally be able to cover if you were to actually go and see a naturopath in person, what we are able to do is, because we have this great advisory board and Lucy is such a key member of that, we're able to often lean on people like Lucy, get the information from her, and then kind of combine it with what Moom offers and give it to all of you, so that everybody who's on our Instagram or who's on the internet basically has access to that information, be it about how to support your PCOS, or how to support hormonal acne, or energy, stress, all of those kind of issues, and how they're all really linked together. So that's definitely how we have been using our digital platform, and really want to continue using it as a tool of education that kind of transcends, just us being in Singapore and only talking to other Singaporeans, but also to people all over the world, and really get that conversation started.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that too is sort of straying away from the more clinical and medical approach to things. While obviously that's the backbone of what we do, and that's why we used experts. Maybe we can explain a little bit further on how we've decided to get away from that clinical notion, and how we use content as a means to promote things digitally or educate things digitally. How have we shifted from the clinical to the more approachable, I guess?
I think a big part of that is definitely the language we use. And so we want it to all be, you're scrolling through Instagram, you see a post, it's attractive, so visually attractive, but then it's also something that is put in a very simple way that doesn't require you to then search 500 other articles to truly understand what is being said. We'd always encourage everybody to do their own extensive research. I think that's a really important part of, bettering your wellness journey. But if, our platform can be that starting point, then that's, I feel like we've really done what we can do. And so we've done things like posts, but then also through interacting with our community. And a big part of that has been, we've launched a series called Tuesday Talks, which Lucy has been a part of as well, where we've answered some of kind of the most pressing questions people have asked us throughout the week on DM. So a lot of people will just shoot us a message or shoot us an email asking a question. There are certain trends that are definitely there. And a lot of times, it starts out with questions very related to our product, but then moves on to more specifically health related. How can I improve my energy levels?
Right.
I'm super stressed. What would you suggest, and why would you suggest it? So things like that. I think another really big part of that has been using our community and using what our community has to say about their experience with Moom as well. We've really tried to use that as an educational tool for other people as well. Obviously, everybody's journey is completely different, but it's always nice to hear that, like, I suffer from really bad period cramps. I've been taking Moom Super Curcumin for the last 3 months, and I'm feeling so much better. It kind of gives another person that impetus that's often required to start doing a little bit of research on their own on the impact of curcumin in period cramps. So yeah,
I think it is sort of interesting how we've used a couple of different things, but not to toot our own horns too much. Switching over a bit to Lucy, I think from a consumer perspective, it obviously makes sense what we're doing, because we're trying to sort of take the information that you give us, condense it, and make it a little bit more approachable. But I would say from a practitioner perspective, you're slightly different than an average practitioner, I would say, in this field, in the sense that you're slightly young, which doesn't mean much other than the fact that, we're targeting the same generations, but also that naturopathy and even modalities like Pilates and yoga are such touch and feel healing modalities, right? Like you really want to meet the person and you really want to understand what they're going through and go on that investigative journey with them. But as a practitioner, we know that you use digital methods a lot as well, and you use your Instagram and you use, all these other things as well. So I guess from your mindset and your perspective, why did you decide to sort of jump into this digital platform and use your own digital platforms as well as a way to start educating people too?
I guess for me, again, it comes down to accessibility, especially moving from like the COVID pandemic space where a lot of people can't leave their homes and have been in lockdowns. Being able to jump on Zoom and help people from afar, I think the benefits that you can still get over Zoom or over online are so, like, there's so many benefits you can still get. Yes, I love sitting in a room or a space with someone, and you can get a lot from like just watching how they are in space. But I think, yeah, like some of the physical examinations and things I can't do over Zoom, but it doesn't change the way that I can support someone. And so, yeah, access has been such a huge thing. Myself, I've come from the country. So I grew up in rural Australia. And so I think for me coming into the naturopathic space, I wanted to make it accessible to people even who lived in rural and remote communities. And then I guess now that's sort of expanded to all over the world.
Yeah, I guess just out of curiosity, was that something that you knew you wanted as you started studying naturopathy, or is that something that came up over time? I guess COVID obviously pushed us all into that direction a bit, but was that something that you'd always been thinking about creating more accessible ways of teaching naturopathy?
Yeah, it really has. I moved to Sydney to study, and when I was studying, I just couldn't believe just a difference in what people knew about health living in a city than in the country. And so from there sort of sparked my curiosity in terms of how can I make this more accessible to everybody. And then I guess working through Moom has even expanded that even more. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, I think accessibility in wellness is like a whole topic we could discuss at length, from price point to space to place to where people are and things like that. But we can do that in another conversation. But it does feel like leaning into this sort of digital era is really necessary now for all sorts of wellness, not only for the reasons that you mentioned, but even, I guess, the slight thing that you mentioned was that creating a digital platform allows people to interact with you and whatever you're putting out all across the world, across geographies, across borders and cultures. And I think we found that that's really interesting about Moom too. While at the moment we might only sell in Singapore, our content can be used globally, right? And we've had people from Canada message us, from Malaysia message us, just saying like, wow, I have PCOS as well, and reading your story was really interesting. And sort of also demystifying this naturopathic world and these like alternative healing modalities. Because a lot of times I think people don't think that these traditional methods are science-backed, but I think we talk a lot about that at Moom, and the amount of clinical research that actually has gone into these modalities is a lot more than people think. But I guess to pose that question to both of you, starting with Mili first and then going to Lucy, how do you feel like using digital spaces and digital platforms in the wellness industry allows us to demystify those traditional medicines, like an Ayurveda or like a TCM or even just herbalism, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think that Well, like kind of what Lucy said, it just kind of increases your knowledge about them. I think a lot of people have preconceived notions on what Ayurveda is or what TCM is. And if you're not taking 100 little potions or whatever it may be, it's not going to work for you. And it's a lot of, I don't know, I've heard people say things like it's a lot of fluff. It's not really, there's no research behind it. And I think that unfortunately, things like Ayurveda and TCM, I would say naturopathy maybe a little bit more now, but Lucy, please correct me if I'm wrong. They haven't really come into mainstream anything, be it mainstream media or mainstream, even like education. And it tends to be these very traditional modalities, which is amazing, but they're like passed down from generation to generation. So if our mom believes in certain Ayurvedic practices, it's kind of just it's passed down to us because that's what we've grown up with and that's what we know and we've seen it work, but that's not necessarily going to be the case for somebody sitting in Sydney if their moms didn't believe in Ayurveda. And the same probably goes for naturopathy or TCM or whatever it may be. So I think being able to create a presence in a digital space for these particular modalities and showing the amount of research that goes behind all of it, the amount of science that it's backed in, to me, I think it's very interesting to see the overlaps between so many of these traditional and holistic wellness practices. That really, I guess it demystifies it and really just educates people more about it, which in turn demystifies it.
Yeah, I guess before jumping in, Lucy, my first question would be, maybe this is slightly different in Australia, but it'd be interesting to hear. In Singapore, at least in the US, where Millie and I went to college, it does feel like even a modality like naturopathy gets a lot of questions. I guess, how have you dealt with those questions that, you know, or the people that are questioning your healing modality? And do you think that the digital world plays a role in trying to help people to understand that, you know, questions are important, of course, but there is a lot of stuff behind, there's a lot of science and there is a lot of research behind what you're doing?
I think it really comes down to people just don't know what it is. Like people don't know what TCM is, people don't know what naturopathy is. And I think it's just like educating people what we actually do. I think people from the outside, if they don't know, they think it's really woo-woo, or like, you know, we're just like throwing different herbs and potions at people, like Millie said. But when you actually have a look at it, or you go and see a practitioner who is studied, I think in Australia it's hard because you can call yourself a naturopath even if you haven't qualified as a naturopath. So that's sort of where we have issues in Australia. And I think it's similar in different parts of the world. So that makes it really hard. But, you know, if you go and see someone who's accredited and they've done their studies, you really get to see, I guess, what we're trying to do and how important it is, and how like we actually do look at science. And I think because like people have been practicing TCM and naturopathy for so many years, like that in itself is also evidence. I think people forget that as well, that it's not just about the papers that have been written. Often the papers that have been, or like the research papers, are there to show or give evidence to the things that we've been practicing for thousands of years.
Right.
So I think, yeah, it's really hard, but it's definitely helping with the digital space in terms of getting that information out there for people to understand and learn. And from there, I think that's where we start to sort of demystify that traditional medicine and knowledge.
Yeah, because I think like it's unsustainable for everyone to be able to go to a class and experience what this is like in a more academic setting. So using these digital platforms, whether it's a brand or you're just an education space or company or organization, obviously digital platforms will allow people to expand that knowledge base. Cool. One more question for Lucy. I guess based on what you have seen, even through your experience with Moom so far as a naturopath, what do you think is missing from that digital wellness space? Because I think there's still a lot to tap on. But I guess, what do you think is missing? Mili, also, I guess a question for you. What do you think is missing? And do you think Moom could be the future of that too?
I think when it comes to the digital wellness space at the moment, everyone Googles everything, right? You have a health problem, you have a symptom, you Google it. And the problem with that is that there's so much information at our fingertips. You get so overwhelmed with like all of the information that's there. Like you don't know where to start, or you start to think that, you know, you might have cancer or something crazy comes up, and then you sort of think the worst, you know. And so I really think what's missing is sort of platforms and organizations where you can find information that's really trustworthy.
Mhm.
So I think that's definitely where Moom comes into it, and organizations and places like Moom, that we can have information on there that we can really trust, and go to if we're looking for information.
Yeah, I think before you jump in, really, like, expert backed is a big part of what we do. And that's so important, because I felt the same way growing up. Whenever I had like any issue, and especially when I had to do anything hormonal, I would search something on Google and it'd be like, you're pregnant. And I'm like, well, that's impossible, but cool, Google, like, thanks for the help.
Mhm.
It feels like even in the medicinal space, like more conventional medicine too, there's such a lack of platforms that are trustworthy, that are transparent. And I think that's a big part of it too, is about being transparent. But Mili, sorry, go ahead, answer the question. I guess, what do you think is missing from the digital wellness space?
Yeah, I don't know if I guess this isn't really missing, but I think there's often too much of this kind of ideal image of what wellness should be on these digital platforms. Kind of like what Lucy said, there's this influx of just so much information. And like what unfortunately often happens on social media platforms or blogs or whatever it may be, is that people create this image of what it's supposed to look like, and then everybody else, I am, unfortunately, sometimes I do this too. I look at someone and I'm like, oh well, I'm not, you know, doing A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, so I have a really bad wellness routine or a
Yeah.
really bad wellness ritual. And so I think that that's something that we also often talk at Moom, is that we want, you know, everything to be possible for you, and there isn't this perfect image. And so it's kind of the opposite of what you asked, but I think rather than there being not enough of this, I think there's too much of this perfect image, and
Yeah.
maybe not enough of like what real wellness or real rituals actually mean, and can what people can actually do.
Yeah, I agree fully. Okay, great. To end it, let's all just go through and say our favorite Moom product that we have, and I guess why. I can start. My favorite is ashwagandha, I think. So ashwagandha is an adaptogen that's been used in Ayurveda for centuries. I love Moom's ashwagandha because it's a clinically studied extract. It's patented. We use KSM 66. It's one of the most potent and clinically studied extracts in the world. And I think it really helped me with a number of things. So ashwagandha is definitely my favorite. Lucy, what about you?
I can never look past magnesium. I think it should be in the water supply. It's just amazing. So many cofactors in so many different things within the body. Great for stress, insulin resistance, thyroid issues, you name it. It's really, really important. So definitely magnesium for me.
Great.
Okay, I was gonna say ashwagandha as a favorite, but I will say probably our curcumin. I have had a lot of skin issues in the past, and I think it's been one of those. I never say there's like a magic pill, but I do think it's kind of been this slightly magical addition to my daily ritual for my skin. It's anti-inflammatory properties. It's just, it brightens your skin. It soothes also like overall body inflammation. And again, we use a patented form of curcumin, CurcuBoost. So it's a super powerful antioxidant. I think just the overall benefits that it's had for me has been really great. So yeah.
Great. Cool. If anyone wants to find out more information about Moom, just go to www.moom.health. I'm sure there'll be links on this Concave platform as well, and reach out in case you have any questions. Thank you so much for joining us.
You.
Bye.